hearing these wonderful men talking. So over to you, Arthur.
Right, thanks very much. I mean, my view has always been, not with any great pleasure, that the only practical way to hope to resolve the issue in the fairest practical way for the Palestinians is a two-state solution. Sorry, I've always thought that.
You might need to stand up.
Yeah. Talk from here, Arthur.
I've always thought, not with much pleasure, that the only practical way to hope for a fair solution, and I use fair in the conditional sense, because this is the real world for the Palestinians, is a two-state solution based on the 67 lines with a minor land swap for all the reasons we all know. And my reasons for that are not that I like the idea of an ethnic state, and Israel aspires to be, the Jews of Israel aspire to be a Jewish ethnic state. That was the Zionist dream. I don't like the idea of ethnic states. They're usually not very nice, and Israel hasn't been very nice. But you've always got to look at what is feasible and what the opposition, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and what their red lines are, as well as the justice of your own cause. And it seems to me that if you just look at a few things, you will realize that it will be several times harder to get Israel to the position, either through persuasion or through pressure, to accept a single democratic state than it will be to get it to accept a two-state solution on the 67 borders. And I think the easiest way into that is just to consider the Second Intifada and the number of people killed in the Second Intifada. Now, I know something like 1,000 Israeli Jews were killed in the Second Intifada. And I know that almost 5 times as many Palestinians were killed, but I'm only thinking of the inference to draw from the number of Jews that were killed. Not for a single instant during the Second Intifada or afterwards has the Israeli government betrayed the slightest inclination to say, okay, we will accept the two-state solution, which the international community has always said is the only legitimate one. Now, the Israeli government is full of people who have degrees in history and international relations, and they know perfectly well, just like people in the foreign ministry of every other country in the world knows, that a long occupation brings forth not only resistance, but also terrorism. Terrorism doesn't come from nothing. It comes from the fact that the occupation has gone on, and it's accompanied by a settlement project. That tells you a lot about Israeli motives. They really, really, really want as much of that land as they can get. Think of the sacrifices of their own people they are willing to make. Now, if you then consider what is the least difficult solution to pressure or force them into, it is the two-state solution. Because what they fear most of all, and again, I'm not saying I think it's right to fear this, but they fear it, is a state without a big Jewish majority. Now, if there were to be a single state between the river and the sea, and you are to take into account all the Palestinians in that area, those who live in the West Bank, in Gaza, also the refugees in the surrounding countries, and the Palestinian Israelis, that state would in fact have roughly 60% Palestinians and 40% Jews. Right or wrong, and I don't think it's right, Israel will not stomach it. That is a hurdle which it would be almost insurmountable. And if you consider varying positions that could occur with lesser numbers of Palestinians than that, you would still come down to a population that was roughly equal 50-50. Now, think of all the things Israel has done in the occupied territories which make a two-state solution difficult. We all know them. There's the wall, which takes into account about 9.5% of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. There's what it wants in the Jordan Valley, which takes into account another 28%. There's the Israeli-only roads, the checkpoints, the roadblocks, all of those things. They make a two-state solution very difficult, but not impossible, because they're all physical things and they can be changed. The Israeli-only roads can become normal roads. Israel would have to build quite a few feeder roads, probably from those roads onto the neighboring Palestinian villages. Roadblocks can be taken down. Israel can withdraw from the Jordan Valley. It could have some military towers in the Jordan Valley if the Palestinians in the world were prepared to accept it, to look eastwards. They are all physical things. To get Israel to do those physical things will be incomparably easier than to get Jewish Israelis to accept that they would live in a state where there would be as many Palestinians as there are, or even nearly as many. So it seems to me that whatever we think of the idea of an ethnic state, and whatever we think of how Israel came into being and the expulsions of 48, which we know of, in the pragmatic sense, aiming for one state makes the solution, it seems to me, virtually impossible. Aiming for two states is at least possible.